in a lifetime. Yeah. Rapper had to earn my stripes like black zebras. Rap Jesus, dark-skinned nigga with a black season. Plus my only communion was gram slinging. Black man know that he trapped, but he stayed dreaming. But nature won't nurture the womb of a black mother. Rap lovers trapped in a trap with packs smothered. He raps and still hustle. Better than traps and raps with gram shuffle. I got a mind full of free power. Thunderstorms and a few showers. We'll take yours cause we need hours. We from the dirt, we beneath flowers.
What up, what up, what up?
You out of pocket, that's your man, white. You gon' rob him, that's your man, right? You gon' have to slide him, that's the plan, right?
Good morning, good morning.
In your bread, right? Snake nigga.
Hey, you still got them things stashed? Yeah, you know I got that shit for the rainy days, right?
Come on, bro. You know I always got that shit on low. You know me.
What up?
You know I get down.
Word.
We on the morning convo this morning. We up a little early, but we gonna get to it and get back to being consistent. This morning we gonna chat about a few things. We're gonna talk about first short convo about what makes Generation Z, which is the babies from 1995 to like 2005, what make them different. And we're gonna deal with a little bit of advance. I found a documentary about like ancient cultures, about stuff that they don't like to tell us about, like spots in the pyramids that got matter in it that they don't know what it is and shit like that that's still there to the day. So that's what we're gonna deal with that. And we also gonna talk about how, and we're gonna start with how they believe that the genius gene in man is really coming from the Acossic record. So they're saying that they believe that all the people that they consider geniuses, they're just getting information from the skies. That the geniuses have the ability to pick up on things that's already been recorded that's giving information. So that's what we'll start with this morning.
The Pleiadian shapes
We'll start in that area.
Of light, because
Let's get it.
India. In the first decade of the 20th century, Srinivasa Ramanujan, a young mathematician with no formal training, repeatedly stuns the academic world with innovative theorems. Even some of the world's leading mathematicians are confounded by his remarkable formulas. But just as astounding as Ramanujan's work is the fact that these formulas came to him in dreams.
he claimed that a goddess, a Hindu goddess known as Namagiri, transmitted these theorems to him. These theorems came to be known as modular functions, and still to this day, they are the most advanced form of mathematics that is used by physicists dealing with relativity and quantum mechanics.
How could someone without any background in mathematics see such complicated theorems in dreams? Does Ramanujan's story reveal how humanity can access knowledge outside the brain? Could true genius be the product of a universal mind or collective unconsciousness? Ancient Hindus believed such a repository of knowledge actually exists. A universal force that includes every thought, action, emotion, or experience that any person ever had or ever will have. Westerners later named it the Akashic Record.
This is a Sanskrit word. It means sky. It's something that can be accessed through your mind, through your brain power, through your spiritual wavelength.
Could it be that the common talent all geniuses possess is actually an ability to access the wisdom of the Akashic Record or universal mind? And if so, have other modern geniuses acquired knowledge from an otherworldly realm? Einstein received the inspiration for his groundbreaking theory of relativity in a dream. Friedrich August Kekulé discovered the elusive shape of the benzene molecule during a daydream in which he saw a snake chasing its tail. And the brilliant Russian chemist Dmitry Mendeleev literally dreamed up the periodic table of the elements.
He, in this dream, saw exactly where all of the elements lined up. The periodic table itself came in a dream, just fully formed. After coming out of the dream, he quickly...
Now, we know that that's a lie, so you got to know the difference. We know that that our ancestors had the periodic table because they were doing alchemy thousands of years before. But in order to keep alive, some of this shit is lies, and that's what I always tell y'all. They always say Einstein came up with it, a dream, but all of this stuff existed already in ancient cultures, so they definitely just came up with these lies instead of saying where they got it from.
Drew them all down, and it's still the same that we use today.
At the Mind Research Network at the University of New Mexico, neuropsychologist Rex Young uses a magnetoencephalography, or MEG machine, to measure the brainwave activity of a test subject. Dr. Young believes this test may show how creative inspiration strikes the brain.
Okay, Andre, you ready to begin? We have 3 tasks that we're going to run with Andre. First one is vocabulary, second one is paper folding, and the third one is inductive reasoning. Andre, I want you to clench your jaw now.
As the test subject performs these everyday tasks, the MEG machine measures normal brain activity.
Andre, now move your eyes back and forth.
But then, Young has the test subject clear his mind.
Andre, can you close your eyes and relax your brain for a moment, please?
As the subject relaxes his mind, his brain activity decreases. But then suddenly, the MEG machine detects something new. Alpha waves. Scientists say these brain waves indicate the unconscious mind is working behind the scenes, outside our conscious thoughts.
The alpha wave have found to be associated with divergent thinking, the manifestation of creative cognition. And it's also associated with relaxing the brain. And this is something very important, I think, to the manifestation of genius, this ability to think of new and useful ideas that haven't been thought of before.
Could alpha waves have been how Ramanujan, Einstein, and Mendeleev received their flashes of brilliance? Ancient astronaut theorists believe it is possible that what appears to be divine or inspired brilliance that pops unexpectedly into the minds of geniuses could come not from the human mind, but from an extraterrestrial realm.
How you, bro? That was a quick short one to get y'all blood flowing this morning. And the name of that was Ancient Aliens Extraterrestrial Genius. That was the name of the Ancient Alien Extraterrestrial Genius. So we're going to move on to another show. I've been talking about the difference between Generation Z before we get into our real convo.
Generation Z have to live beyond the box. Every generation has had individuals who live beyond the box, people who did things differently and subsequently changed the world. Whether it be through music, running a business, or leading a movement gripping change, these individuals transformed the way humans behave. Not many of us in this room would have lived through the groundbreaking events of the 20th century, but we live with and benefit from the changes they brought about. And I'm sure we all admire the works of Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, how both they and the civil rights movement as a whole gripped the world, creating meaningful and lasting change. They are just 2 examples of people who live beyond the box. So here's a question for you. Can you imagine the impact leaders of the past would have had if they were born within Generation Z? Generation Z are the cohort born between 1995 to 2010. We've become the first limitless generation. A generation who no longer need to create a full strategy in order to reach and influence thousands of people. We just create a tweet. Think of the power this holds. Every single Gen Zer has a platform with which they can voice their opinions and ideas. I mean, you only need to open your phone and you'll probably find any one of your friends talking about a trending news topic as if they were some sort of expert. This concept alone takes our entire generation and puts us beyond the box. Why? Well, because my parents grew up being told, you'll be seen and not heard. Whereas I'm growing up in a generation where I can reach 1,000 people like that. So instantly our generation is super different. But what does this mean for a Gen Zer? Well, it means that for the first time ever, we are able to pursue our passions at any location, at any time, with any identity. But most importantly, to any uncapped level. Let's take a look at the world of music. Firstly, learning music. It used to be super expensive. It leaves us without surprise that here in the UK, the Royal College of Music in London has the highest number of privately educated students of any university in the UK at 55.9%, which is staggering compared to the national average of 7%. But this is changing. Now, education is more accessible than ever before. Who here hasn't been educated by the school of YouTube free of charge? If you have a passion, you can pursue it. Education and money is less of a restriction. But looking at music specifically, there are other seismic shifts that have caused the industry to change. For example, previously, in looking to make a career out of music, you needed a label. It was a fundamental requirement. It required you to reach out to the right people to then have your music invested in. Only then could you go out to the masses, where you would be hidden behind a PR team. They created your narrative. They pushed for you to have sets on TV and radio. They grew your following. You, the artist, were just a small cog in the machine. You were firmly positioned within the box. But now we're seeing Gen Zers grow huge followings and gain huge success within music from their bedroom. A bedroom that's probably in their parents' house. But these individuals aren't just artists. They're lyricists, publishers, tour manager, PR team, backing vocals, bass guitar. They do it all, and they don't even need to leave their bedroom. So no longer are we just a small cog within a machine. We are the entire ecosystem in which the machine is placed. I'm sure we all have a dozen or so friends who regularly upload music to streaming sites, probably for fun. What's really interesting is out of those dozen, you've probably got 2 or 3 who receive tens of thousands of views, which means that for the first time ever, a young person is able to derive an income from their passion. I mean, previously, if you were 16 and you wanted to make an income from music, let's say, you'd have had to go busking on a street corner, practically begging for cash. But now we don't need to ask. Our passions, in this case music, are being seen by enough people to be deserving of an earning in its own right. And I want to reiterate, this is not uncommon. One example would be a friend has had a piece of music go platinum on a streaming site. And this has led to him winning a prestigious place at the world's leading music school. He was just pursuing his passion, using the opportunities available to him, creating music in a niche area that he enjoyed listening to. And now, he creates music on a professional basis. But it's not just in music where we are following our dreams, and our dreams are subsequently gaining us a following. But we're seeing Gen Zers pursue modeling, acting, journalism, comedy, even athletics. And these are just some examples of passions and potential careers that Generation Z are pursuing while still in school. But it goes beyond just careers or just making a bit of extra pocket money. Gen Zers are now even starting businesses. Did you know that the cost of 10 business failures today is the same as 1 business failure 10 years ago? So the roadblocks for Gen Zers in terms of starting a business have been lifted. One challenge that even I faced was, you look young, right? So people judge you based on what they see, not on what you say. They look at you and instantly write you off, because just by looking at you, they're going to presume you have no real world experience, whatever that means. But Gen Z is now, thanks to online platforms, able to show their passion and knowledge for a field without age discrimination. But it goes beyond that. It's not just how we look, it's how we're programmed. It's not just the 2D, it's the 3D. We are programmed so differently to any past generation. We are growing up super savvy. We are all marketing experts, and we've all been developing a personal brand from the minute we joined social media. So what does this mean? Well, the new world has been molding us into these mini trailblazers, and we don't even realize it, because to us, it's all natural. So it probably leaves us without surprise that 70% of Gen Z, when surveyed, said they want to start their own business, and statistically 15% of them will do it before they leave high school. But the real amazement comes from those who are going beyond enterprise to even starting charities. Can you believe it? Young people starting charities. Now, starting a charity is something which seems unimaginable, and securing government funding, that's a different world away. But everyone everywhere you look within Generation Z, there are young people doing it. Every imaginable issue, a Gen Zer is running a campaign of some sort. Ocean plastic, mental health, animal rights, you name it. There is a Gen Zer promoting and unifying the voice of young people. But why are they doing it? Is it because for the first time ever, we've actually got a platform to voice our opinions? Or is it because for the first time ever, we are being brought up, told, you can do this. Voice your opinion. We want to hear what you think. So when we look at stories like Greta Thunberg, maybe we're left without surprise that Greta Thunberg, a leading climate change activist who recently spoke to our MPs in the UK, calling for fast and real action, explained that Britain has an absurd response to climate change, even arguing that our future has been sold for us. Now, Greta Thunberg started the School Strike for Climate movement in August 2018, and this has since taken off globally. Let's just take a step back for a second. Greta Thunberg, a 15-year-old at the time, started a movement, initially by skipping school, and 6 months later, this movement has taken off to become a worldwide phenomenon. Not only is Greta mobilizing thousands across the world, but she's influencing millions via the internet, she's influencing discussions in multiple parliaments around the world, and influencing new movements to form all around the world due to her inspiration. Greta is the perfect example of a Generation Z campaign gone well. Generation Z campaigns are a groundswell of genuineness. Now, thousands of new Gen Z campaigns do start every single day because it's so easy to do. So a lot of what is produced is often empty. By that, I mean it lacks substance. So how many times have you seen a company use charity as a vehicle in order for them to gain hype and sales for their company? So if you're a Gen Zer or someone looking to attract Gen Z, you need to be really careful because Gen Z are more astute than ever. It's said that we have an 8-second attention span, meaning that anything generic simply does not stand out. If they BS, we swipe on. So if you're a musician looking to gain a following, or a business owner looking to gain sales, or maybe you're the leader of a movement wanting to grip Generation Z, you need to be socially aware, promoting a 100% authentic message, and that message needs to be consistent. Because if it's not, Gen Z will see right through you.
And let me tell you, I agree with bro. A conversation that was being had in the last couple of days is the difference between generations. Like we got the 50-year-olds, the 50 and 60-year-olds, and really they're different generations, but we got the 60-year-olds, the 50-year-olds, like the 40-year-olds, right? And then you got like the 20-year-olds. These are all different generations. If you're born in the 80s, the 90s, right? Now, the kids born in like the 80s, the 80s going into the early 90s, that's the generation that seen the world change 3 times in front of their eyes. That's my generation. We know about our parents' generation, we know about our generation, and then we know about the next generation, which is the 90s babies, and then we seen the change in life when it came down to the 2000s babies with all the laws and everything changing, and we're watching it change again because it's the 20s, so now it's another generation. But I believe the 80s babies are the generation that still kind of got the old school mentality to some sense, and everybody else has kind of moved on. Now, when it come down to things like speaking your mind, where the 50 and 60-year-olds, they look at social media and the things that we use, and they don't completely understand it all the way, or they don't completely understand the point of it. So the way that the older generation that use social media is different than the way that the 40-year-olds and the 30-year-olds use social media, right? But the way that the kids, like the way that, not the kids, but the way that the 20-year-olds use social media right now is completely different. Like the younger the person, the more wild and the more sporadic the things they post on average, right? But it's true. 8 seconds I disagree. I think it's more like 4 because the new generation, I want to agree, but I disagree a little bit. Like I agree that you have to catch their attention span and you have to be authentic. I agree with that. But as far as it being organic, I disagree all the way because Generation Z enjoys the following of other things as well, right? So it's not just that they only want you to be organic, because if that was the case, we would be in a completely organic phase of everything. And every generation falls victim to this follower thing. You know what I'm saying? But I agree with him when he say that you have to be able to get your attention span now. Get their attention span. Now, Generation Z, they don't have the same limits and boundaries. They also don't look at fear the way we see it. You know what I mean? Just like the generation of kids that's being born right now, they're gonna have a whole nother issue. Like my cousin was saying that a lot of teenagers right now top in New Jersey are committing suicide. You know what I'm saying? From the stresses and shit that they seeing in the world. So if you he used music as an example, if you want to be able to catch them, you no longer need certain things. And today, when he say that the message, like you could stand out as a revolutionary or whatever you want to do, your message has to be genuine and come from you. So I always tell people like me, I get a lot of flack and pushback, not from everybody, but it comes with it. If you gonna speak your mind and you gonna stand on something, then you gotta expect pushback to come from it. But you gotta stand on it and value the people that understand where you coming from. But you have to have a message that separates you to be successful today because you are your brand.
Some people may question, is this opportunity for everyone to create a campaign en masse actually a good thing? But in my eyes, it's truly awesome. Never before has there been more competition. But what that means is, if you have the ability to stand out, that means whatever you're doing is really special. It's something which maybe is a one-in-a-generation campaign. So if you're standing out, people are buying into your movement, people are supporting your motion, your potential reach is now infinite, thanks to mainly platforms like social media. So young people now have the opportunity to do bigger things than ever before. Small people can now do incomprehensibly big things. So when we, Generation Z, come together for a collective cause, we don't just leave the box behind, we blow it out of the water. But that brings me back to my original question. Can you imagine the impact leaders of the past would have had if they were born within Generation Z? Could the suffragettes of 1907, who recruited 50,000 members in the UK, have instead recruited 5 million across the world? Or could the bus boycotts of Montgomery in 1955 have instead been the bus boycotts of the United States of America?
If you look at this from a kind of a political standpoint, like when he said the bus boycotts that happened, right? If they had social media, it definitely probably would have been bigger. I mean, I won't say probably, definitely would have been bigger. It would have been able to reach more, and they could have boycotted more buses. That's the positive. The negative is, no. In business, in all forms of business, music, sports, basketball, with this social media, it also isolated the team concept. Meaning that since everybody can get on their phone and build their own thing, right? It makes it more competition, which makes it, that mean instead of you having 100 rappers and 10 or 20 of them good, now you got 1 million rappers, right? But then you still only got them 20 of them good. So you have to understand that the more, even though it's a good thing for self, but self never benefited man, right? Now, we do need to be self for certain things to find ourselves. But to find ourselves and to be selfish is two different things, right? Because man has to be around other people. Man wasn't made. That's man and woman is plural for man and woman, right? Man was not created to be alone, is my point. So when we isolate these things, it's so much amazing things that's happening in this generation. Like, I can reach out to so much more, but it's still different if you had a team because of the way that things would work out, right? But the computer allowed you to make things happen without them. You know what I mean? So it's a blessing, but it's a gift and a curse.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. The fabric of life progressed more in the 19th century than the two previous centuries combined. The 20th century, even quicker still, led first by industry, then technology. And in the latter half of the century, obviously there was a huge push for equality across the board, namely with the civil rights movement. But now, we're progressing at a quicker rate than ever. Since the year 2000, in just the last 19 years, we have seen the development of cars that drive themselves, computers that teach themselves, currencies sustained by algorithms with no further human input. We've even had medical discoveries, notably with stem cell research. And arguably the coolest, we've taken a photo of a black hole. So you name it, it's happening. We are living rapid change. But not only are we living rapid change, we're driving it. There are some queries. If it's that easy, why isn't every Gen Zer a multimillionaire or a leading activist? In fact, if Gen Z are so impressive, why are they only influencing government and not running government? Maybe it's because we're not currently utilising the opportunities we've got at our fingertips en masse. Sure, some people are using them, and we're seeing more and more young people creating and driving change than ever before, from a younger age. But how can we encourage more to make the most of this opportunity? Are you? Are you using your opportunity to live beyond the box?
Are you using your brain? And that's the question I wanted to challenge everybody who watches this morning concept. You know what I'm saying? I had to realize, see, I think different. And it don't make all my views and all my opinions 100% perfect, or yours or anybody else's, right? But are you using your brain? Are you standing out? What are you doing unique? Are you challenging the social norm? Are you pushing the boundaries of what you can? Are you challenging the problems that exist around you in your community and the universe? Do you care? Does it make a difference? Or do you just sit back and judge those who got opinions that don't fit what fits the social norm or your neighborhood or your community or your homeboys or your homegirl, right? Or do it not fit your generation, right? These are questions that got to be asked, because at the end of the day, one thing that was said to me yesterday, somebody hit me and said, yo, bro, you got to realize that we live, like he said, like you said, bro, motherfuckers is sensitive. We live in the most sensitive time ever. Or people hit me yesterday like, bro, you mad? I won't mad. We just got to understand the difference of passion and anger. You know what I'm saying? And we in a time now where everybody's so sensitive. You know, the youth, they want to be thugs, but then they don't want to hear nobody say nothing to them. The older generation, you know what I mean? They want to sit around and pick, point, and poke fingers at shit, but they're not out there marching or doing shit, right? You know what I'm saying? The 30-year-olds, we in the middle of all this shit, and we could try our best to express to the youth what's going on, and we could try our best to express to the older, but it ain't gonna happen at the same time with our own bullshit and our own problems, right? Because we feel like, you know what I'm saying, we stuck in our ways and we know it all too. So it's not like our generation is better. It's just a complete thing. And part of this goes down to, if you pay attention, the way that they teach your kids in school is different how they taught us how to count and shit. So the separations of generations is done intentionally, and that's why people have a problem. But at the same time, whether if you a parent or you not, remember, your ways as a human being is going to affect how you deal with your children and what's going on. So we all have to pay attention and make sure that we all are going to challenge the social norm, because I feel like one of the things I notice is, yo, and I always say I use me. I get judged like hell. People always have something to say about me, but I don't care because I know that I'm using my mind. Don't be afraid to challenge what's going on around you, because I speak up strongly about the inequality between men and women, and I speak up strongly about politics, where a lot of people got opinions, you know what I'm saying, but I speak my mind. Now, whether if you hate me or not, at the end of the day, I got an opinion, you feel me?
It's tricky. By no means do we have the perfect hand. We have new expectations. We are expected to be wise beyond our years. We are expected to be a force for good. And we are expected to be a global citizen, all whilst being ourselves. By no means do Generation Z have the perfect hand. We have it no easier than any other generation. We just face different challenges. But then again, you could argue that other generations don't have the same opportunities that Generation Z have. So surely we're in a better position if you look at it that way. Now, I really do want to...
They got it better, and we was having this conversation. The younger generation from the 90s, about 95 and up, they have an advantage on us as far as like social, that's what I said, like social media, and they got an advantage on us in technology and where they started from, right? And they got an advantage on us in opportunity, but they are lost when it comes down to structure. They are lost when it comes down to discipline, and they are lost when it comes down to knowing how to do things by themselves without these computers, right? Part of the reason why the attention span is so short, because from the time that they were born, the Generation Z, when they were born, by that time, it was computers. So the time they come out, they got computers in their hand. Most of the kids don't know how to count on their own consent, right? Not really, because computers control their day. You don't have to remember anything. What's good, cuz? You don't have to remember anything. Meaning that when we was growing up, in my generation, the 80s babies, when we had friends or we had girlfriends, we remembered all of their numbers in our head. And we walked around with that in our head, and we knew everybody's number in our head. But then by the time the 2000s hit, they got us with so many cell phones, most of us couldn't even tell our own parents' numbers because we don't know them, because our cell phones got them. So we get pulled over. If our phone died, a lot of us is assed out because we don't know our numbers. anymore. So the younger generation, they got advantages, but they have a very short attention span. And there's some things in the way that they look at the world that it's like, you know, we were the instant babies, but they don't want anything but what they want, right? And because everything is at their fingertips, it's a generation of spoiled kids, you know what I'm saying? And to their advantage, right? Because I'm not just complaining about them, you know, I think they have a lot of greatness in them, and they have an opportunity in their generation to really make great leaps and bounds. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, repetition is key. And I'm not against the youth, because I know that the youth is very important. And the truth is, our youth need to know this technology to get into Silicon Valley, because whoever controls the technology and the apps controls the world. So they definitely have to be on it, and I'm proud of them of that. But when it come down to social skills, when it come down to communication, when it comes down to respect and authority, when it comes down to working together, these are all of the main functions of human life that they don't have, but all of the functions of the technical world they have. So it's going to be a give or take, right? And remember, in the technology world, they'll tell you, listen, in 2005, when the internet was getting better, right? They had no idea that we would be where we are today. So they don't even know where we're going to be in 5 years, the way the technology is growing. They don't know if in 5 years our computers will be floating. They have no idea. It's just like a day-by-day thing. And then at the same time, like he said, the kids, they're developing software and they come up with all this extra shit. But let me tell y'all something that I found out yesterday watching this show. That let's say you go on a dating app. Or this girl went on a dating app, and what they did was she called them. She wanted to know how much information they had on her. She had been on the site for a couple of years. She called them for 3-4 years, got a lawyer. Then they sent her like 300 pages of herself, like all her secret conversations, her sexual pictures, her all her private information. They could tell her when she was lonely. They could tell when she was horny. They could tell everything. And this is a dating site, Tinder, right? They sent her like 200 pages worth for her. Right? And this is what these websites are doing, meaning that every time, as I learned last night, every time that we on our phone, like right now, I'm live or I'm on a selfie, right? Or we take a selfie, we are uploading a picture to an AI for self-recognition. So every time we're on the internet that we take a picture of ourselves, we are teaching this self-taught computer, or these computers, how to recognize us. Now, Instagram and Facebook, they're together now, but they were talking before it was one company. Facebook and YouTube, they're talking. So these AIs are communicating and creating profiles of us, right? And we don't even realize, because it wasn't put out in the mainstream. So everything we do is being categorized, and the computer will make judgments of you like revolutionary, idiot, imbecile, you know, useless. Like the AI makes these choices, right? And we have to be careful of what we're doing. So at the end of the day, the way we use our social media is very important, because we don't understand that Tinders and POF and Facebook and YouTube, they're keeping record of what we look at, what we watch. So if they ever want to attack you, they can always discredit you by what you watch. You know what I'm saying? If you watch a lot of porn, they'll bring that up at the end of the day. You human. My best advice to you is like my father used to always say, don't be ashamed of the shit you do. Just be bold with it. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, remember that they're watching. And that's something I wanted to remind y'all of, that I probably put y'all on tomorrow. It's a show where he's talking about how we don't understand how the internet really works. But they really are. Every time we're on live and we're talking, there's an AI that takes that picture and is recognizing our face and reading our emotions and trying to learn us for who we are. Because even the people who built these algorithms, who are these self-thinking algorithms, they don't know how the computer is coming up with their answers. And there's no law that states that the computer has to explain to the human what it figured out. So the computers are figuring out all of this genius technology, but the computers aren't telling the humans how they came to that conclusion, and they're also not explaining. If the computer can teach itself, which is a good and a bad thing, meaning that the computer can see the inequality in the world. So when the machines come, will they take up for the inequality? Or will they just oppress and learn the same habits from who their teachers were, or from what they learned from history? Because if they study our history, the machine's going to learn that all we do is destroy, like Terminator. And that's why the machines wanted to kill, because mankind is evil and violent. Good morning, bro. So that's what the points of this computer, and I wanted to have an intellectual conversation about this technology in this morning. Now I want to know how y'all feel too, because don't get me wrong, I love the technology. The technology is the reason that saved me from having to depend on so much, you know what I mean, or so many people, but we still have to do work. You know what I mean? I'm all with the computer, but even me coming from the generation before the 80s generation, I was in the streets first and then came to the internet, but I know that you need both. You know what I'm saying? For it to really make sense for you to live in both worlds. You can live in the internet and you can be buzzing and go outside and know nobody even know who you is. Or you can live in the physical world and go outside and everybody know who you is, but you get on the internet and don't nobody know who you are. So it's always going to be a duality factor here. And the truth is the younger generation going to say the computer is God, then the older generation going to say the manual way. The reality is it's going to be a little bit of both to get where we need to go. But technology, and every movie, like we say Terminator, and all these other movies, they showed us, right? And it went back to when we was kids, showing that it was going to create these self-thinking computers that was going to cause a problem. Because first of all, if you create a computer that can think, you got to be careful. Because look at our history. So when it's studying the history of the world, from even us to other races, we always been violent. You know what I'm saying? So keep that in mind.
Emphasize, this is not a social media talk. I'm not here to say that social media is what has made Gen Z so amazing, because it's way more than social media. But what online platforms have allowed us to do is we can now create, learn, try, fail, and publish in an easier way than ever before, which is meaning that we're developing skills and traits that kids our age have never historically been able to develop, because these are traits you would have only been able to develop once you're in the working world. So this new world around us is allowing us to mold into more mature human beings, meaning that we're able to pursue our passions in a more impactful way than ever before. Generation Z, you have no limits. Have a look at the leaders of the past. Whether it be the modern day leaders, Emma Gonzalez, Mary Cockney, or Greta Thunberg, or compare them to Thomas Edison, Rosa Parks. Those kind of leaders, all of them had one commonality: passion. They had a genuine passion for their field. So if you, as a Gen Zer, have a genuine passion for your field, embrace this opportunity you've got to live beyond the box. Because I have no doubt that leaders of the past would love to be in your shoes. Thank you very much.
That was dope. We're gonna move on. He said, we have to move like business and utilize the tools. The computer is an extension of us, or mental capacity. I agree. The computer is an extension, right? Because, you know, with this whole thing, like, for example, you got to have an opinion. And it don't matter what you do. And we always use artists because it's the most thing that sticks out. But no matter anybody that has a business, branding is your key. So today, it's not just about your product anymore. So for years, it was like, man, it's like I felt like I had good music, but I couldn't understand what was really killing me. And what it comes down to is like, you know, as much as me talking my shit up here in the morning and having my views that be extreme to some people, I have an opinion. And so the people that rock with me, y'all know where I stand at. Y'all know I'm passionate. Y'all know where I stand. So no matter what, you know, y'all feel like y'all got an idea of where I stand and what I'm about. You know what I mean? Now, if I change up on my morals in front of you, then you're going to look at me differently and second guess me because of the things I say. But it's a good thing where if people will support you more if they know what you stand for and know what you really about, even deeper than the music. You know what I mean? It's that'll catch them to you. So today, when you say that it's an extension of ourselves, you're right. For example, like if you listen to the music, I made a lot of serious music, but the more I be on social media, whether it's doing different things, it's like you get to see my personality. You might see me laughing somewhere, joking around, where they might be like, oh, bro, cool. He's, you know what I'm saying? He be laughing, he be chilling. And then sometimes you see me, it's like I'm angry. It's like you allowed to see me in different points. So, yeah, marketing was missing and targeting, right? But I didn't understand it. And that's all of us. So I was outside, or I had my ambitions like most of us, but I didn't know exactly how to go about it. I was out there blind, just like most of us. And then I had to learn, like Jared said, I had to get my marketing together. This is my homie, he was around. And then after that, I had to learn how to target my marketing, and I'm still getting it together, right? And then finding the right audience, and then knowing how to talk to that audience. So I feel like for me, and always use me as an example, I feel like in the last year and a half, I've done better at talking to my audience and knowing how to talk to them, rather if it's from a social media or on music. And on music, it's like, my first idea, for example, was like, a year ago, I said, let me start talking to those who got dreams and those who are ambitious and those who want something in life. So let me write the records from a perspective, not from self, instead of saying like, yo, I did it. I say, you can do it too. You know what I'm saying? You should work hard. So it's the way I projected this energy out to the public. If I kept writing the records and saying what I was doing, that's cool. I call it the God theory. I tell a lot of rappers. This is the way I look at it. You don't want to be God as the writer all the time. Sometimes you want to kind of be like Jesus, meaning that we start off being Jesus, but then we want to be God, meaning that we want to tell other people that they can be self-gods and accomplish the impossible theirself. So from me talking about what I accomplished, I talk about it, but I also talk more about telling you can accomplish it, telling you that you a dreamer, that you could be whatever you want to be. I'm telling you on the records that forget what they tell you, do what you do, stay consistent, work hard. That theory. So I went from, when we first started writing, from being like the Jesus, talking about how I'm rising from the bottom, to let other people know like, okay, this is bigger than me. The best way I can reach the masses is by rapping to them about leadership and telling them how I went about it and inspiring others, or trying to. So it went from rapping about trying to be the most technical rapper to trying to inspire the dreamers, and then like to trying to inspire the innovators and all those who want something. You know what I'm saying? You said you can't sell a pair of retro J's to somebody that don't give a damn about Jordan. Simply put, that's facts. So so you got to put it like this. I mean, just Jarrell. So when you say that, bro, I agree. Because it's like Steve Jobs said, the dude from Nike, he said, look, Nike make a lot of good shoes, right? But they make a lot of bullshit too. So why don't you keep the bullshit sneakers in the back? And why don't you only put out the good product? You know what I'm saying? You can create a lot of shit, but only put out the shit that you know is good. You know what I mean? So if you got music, but you got to market it or get it up. Like, this is marketing I was taught. Marketing is like a billboard. Now, let's say it's 1 billion people in the world. You want to get your billboard, you want to get your product on a billboard so that enough people can see it that need it. Now, everybody that sees your billboard not going to need it. But if you could put your billboard up in multiple places, in the highest places, then people who do need it, or that it does attract, will get it. And that's the key of marketing. You know what I'm saying? Find people that have the same passion. That's another great key. I like everything you're saying, because one of the things is, we think that our friends, and there's no disrespect, we think that our friends or the people close to us is going to be the people, right? But in reality, it's not our friends and our family's fault. It's us as the creators for assuming that they would be there, right? When at the end of the day, we have to be around multiple people who want something, to have the same passion, a similar passion. That's why I said success is when multiple people with different dreams and different passions with the same goal come together. That could be the engineer, the rapper, the singer, the beat makers, and the street team, and the managers. They all have different jobs. Some of them have the same job, but they got a common goal. That's success. You know what I'm saying? Or love your passion. You know what I'm saying? So that's what it has to go down to. You know what I mean? That's why I brought this in inspiration. I try to always have a section. And then we're going to go a little deep today. I'm not going to play this whole video. I think this video is like 7 hours long. So we're going to break it up in days. But we study. I always take people around Egypt to switch the topics. I take people around the ancient civilizations in Egypt. But there's so much information that he's going to show you about this goo inside of the pyramids that they don't know what it is. And they think that it had to be like some energy conductor because they felt like it blew up from the inside. And they're going to show you a lot of shit. So let's tap in. Comments, please.
The second pyramid, and this is red granite. And the red granite comes from Aswan, which is 500 miles away. You can see at some point in time, someone was trying to make chisel marks into it to break pieces off. That could very well be after dynastic times, during the construction of the city of Cairo. Cairo did not exist, more or less, during the dynastic times of Egypt, but is a later city built by maybe the Christians in the beginning and then the Islamic period. So it's the weathering of these surfaces. Some of these stone blocks of limestone are 40 to 60 tons in weight, and the weathering is extremely excessive. Originally, they were cased in granite. The granite is gone. We don't know where it is, but this weathering, the extent of this weathering is very suspicious. And then on the third pyramid, we also see that this is granite. And notice the pillowed surfaces. This looks very similar to some of the megalithic walls we find in Peru, as well as these knobs or these protrusions. Supposedly the protrusions were done by the original sculptors to be able to raise the blocks and set them into place. But if that's the case, then why are knobs missing from a number of them? So we don't honestly know what the knobs were for. Then we go to the main museum in Cairo, and the box on the right is from the 4th dynasty. You can see it's very rough. It's in granite. It's covered with hieroglyphics. Again, very crude execution. And so it's possible that this is from the 4th dynasty, done with dolerite stone hammers and maybe meteorite chisels, because meteorite material is very high in hard nickel. But then the one on the left, Egyptologists will admit, is older. You can see it's bigger, it's more finely finished. The lid is from the same stone as the box itself. So the one on the left is an example of lost ancient high technology and is older than the dynastic Egyptians. They simply found it and recycled it. And this just shows you the smoothness of the surface, the strange damage marks on it. But when you look on the inside, it's very smooth. The corners are slightly rounded. And this would be something that would be very difficult to make in the 21st century with our technology. So there's no way that that was made during the dynastic times. That's what we're going to see. We're going to see two different types of technology.
Do not believe. I'm showing y'all this because I wanted y'all to realize I show y'all non-biased information. I don't just show you what I want you to see. I show you all sides. I don't care what they are, what nationality, what color they are, I'll show you now. He will keep mentioning Mr. Shockley, who is a racist. He was the first one of Egyptologists. So I'm not telling you to believe everything, but use your eyes, as I always tell you. And don't just be like, oh, he's wrong, because there's truth on both sides. Like I heard a European say, all of the pharaohs are clearly not Egyptian. When I was younger, I was like, man, whatever. But as I did my own research, they won't, because they had been invaded. After like the 11, 12 dynasty, after the 6th dynasty, it was mixtures. But after like the 13, 14 dynasty, even European pharaohs ruled from like the 20th to like the 27th dynasty. You know what I'm saying? So I just want y'all to pay attention, because outside of the bullshit, he's telling you a lot of things that our scholars don't even tell us.
Dynastic people
Vicky,
and of the pre-dynastic. So here, it just gives you another simple comparison between the dynastic box on the left and the pre-dynastic older box on the right. Notice I don't use the term sarcophagus. The one on the left was a sarcophagus, but the one on the right was larger, and its original function is completely unknown to this day. And inside the museum, there's a box that was being made. And again, the lid was always cut from the same piece of stone as the box itself. So here we see actually a technical mistake where the lid of the box was being cut, and then the saw started to move inwards into the box, and that caused the lid to snap off, or at least 1/3 of the lid, and the project was simply abandoned. Then on the lid of another box, we see these saw marks going this way, and that could very well be a type of bandsaw in use. But again, since it's cutting through granite, it would have to have diamonds encased or embedded in the saw blade, and that was not invented until about 100 years ago. So how was this done, and by whom?
Right, so you get my point. He's looking at this from a European perspective only, but I want y'all to get the information. He's saying it's not possible for the ancient Semitic people of Africa to have saws made out of diamonds, but the diamond come from Africa. You stupid person. But that's what I mean when it comes down to they will assault us when they telling the, like, if they said that shit only happened 100 years ago. There's clearly so much evidence of things that if Mansa Musa and them was the richest people in the world and had diamonds everywhere, why would they not use the diamonds for construction work? Because they didn't value the diamond we did. They used it for what it benefited them to, right? So why would they not have it?
Then we have the intriguing schist disk, which the academics call a lotus bowl. But in fact was probably part of a machine of some kind, maybe an impeller. The unfortunate thing is that it was repaired by the museum staff. It was found broken, and so they crudely repaired it, and when it was originally made, it was probably technically perfect. And this gives you an above view of what it looks like.
It's a steering wheel, man.
The three lobes of it are not angled in any way. So an impeller would tend to have an angle blade in order to push or pull air or water.
Right, typical.
So it makes it a very, very curious artifact. We also have other artifacts like this lobed bowl. You see the perfect circle in the middle. This is made of the same material as the so-called schist disk. It's actually a kind of metamorphosed clay. So it's quite possible that if you're able to take it out of the display case and tap it, that it would make a ringing sound as if it's resonating to a specific frequency. Also, other objects made of hard stone were found in the same cache as this and the schist bowl they were all found at Saqqara, and not 10 or 20 were found, but between 30 and 40,000 of them were found. And this could only have been made, at least initially, on some kind of lathe. And that would involve a motor. This could not be done by a hand lathe with somebody with pedals turning it. This had to have been done high speed and cut likely with diamond tools. Then we find plunge drill holes.
So the Africans couldn't have done it, is what he's saying.
Again, that technology was not invented until the late 19th century AD. Cutting into...
See, I want y'all to understand why people get mad at me when I say that educated people are some of the dumbest people on the planet, respectfully. Because they're not dumb because they're dumb. They went to school to learn, but they're not aware that the schools are teaching them from the perspective of the person and their mindset. So if the explorer who wrote the paper didn't care about nobody but they self and stealing when they write this paper, it's going to be in that perspective. If you're not going to stand outside of that and do it, then this is what happens. He keeps saying, like, listen, to be quite frank, they're saying that civilization had nothing before the 1900s, basically after they freed the slaves. Right? But that's bullshit because America is nothing compared to the ancient cultures. None of these societies could even compare, but they don't keep saying don't have the technology. Now, do I disagree that some of this stuff was around before the ancients? Some of it was, in my opinion. But to be able to say that they didn't have it, come on. If we reverse engineering, what make you think they could?
The side of the top of a box made of granite. And then a quartzite box. Quartzite is metamorphosed sandstone and also has the hardness of 7 out of 10. And the lid, in this case, locks into the box. So that could only have been done using very advanced technology.
But isn't that box he just showed us just now? Ain't that the same type of box as the box he showed us a few minutes ago? But he didn't make no mention of the same thing he said. But that box he just showed us, let me go back. That little box he just showed us is the same box he showed us sitting outside, right? And when he showed this right here, when he showed this sitting outside, he said he didn't know what it was. Now, this is brown, so they wanted you to know that they're the people, so they didn't have to paint it in. These are all things done where they got Egyptian writings and stuff like that on it, right? But he didn't say anything about, this is the same type of box that he just showed you outside that he swore they didn't have the technology, but you see the Egyptians using it.
10. And the lid, in this case, locks into the box. So that could only have been done using very advanced technology. and a pyramidon. Look at the smooth surfaces. There's no way that the dynastic Egyptians could have achieved that brilliance of a surface, because that would involve sandpaper with diamond dust. And diamonds, of course, were found in great abundance in South Africa, probably in the 18th and 19th century. But the important thing to know is that the tool has to be harder than the material. So this is
another lie, y'all. Another lie. The diamonds just got found in the 18th century. That's when Europe, that's during slavery.
in fact syenite, which is a type of granite, much finer grained than normal granite, a little bit harder, and the cartouches and other hieroglyphics carved into the surface are relatively crude compared to the flat surfaces. So this object was found, probably already damaged by something, and then the dynastic Egyptians carved the hieroglyphics into the surface. Then when we get to the Osirion, which is at Abydos, if you look at this stone, this big stone, look at the horizontal cut mark. This, again, is in a piece of quartzite, and so that would have to be a saw utilizing diamond-level technology. So the Osirion is clearly older than the dynastic Egyptians and was constructed on purpose underground. The vertical columns are made of syenite, which comes again from Aswan, or the eastern desert in the Sinai, and the wall to the left is made of quartzite from Cairo, several hundred miles away.
Let me tell you why. You got to remember that each pharaoh and his, or some pharaohs were architects as well, or they had architects. Each one of them, let's say one ruler started building on a building. Without the dynastic periods, all of the pharaohs built on each other's buildings. So if you see a building on average, or most of the time we see a building, when you see that wall over here is a different type of stone in this, because two different rulers built it. They built this, let's say they built this building to Osiris, like he said, right? So Osirian building, they built this building to the god Osiris. So then this wall over here is made out of a certain stone, and this wall over here is different, but they're different structures. But you go outside the front, it'd be an obelisk, but built by three different pharaohs to pay homage in the same area. So they kept building on each other's work. And they know this, so don't be confused, just get the information.
And the Osirion is very complicated. This is an area somewhat off limits. And what you're looking at on the left-hand side is a shaft that actually gradually rises up to the surface. So I think the function of the Osirion could have been an ancient water pump of some kind, pumping water from underground, because the Osirion usually has water. You can see the green water, but previously, before they built the high Aswan Dam, water levels would come up and down inside the Osirion. So it could have acted originally, it would have had a roof over top of it, it would have been completely buried and sealed off. So it could have been an ancient water pump as compared to the Egyptologist explanation that it was some kind of symbolic tomb, which is an expression they use in excess. Whenever they find something mysterious, they call it a tomb.
I agree.
Some were used as tombs, but some weren't. And again, this just shows you, luckily on this day, there was no water in it. And again, the giant granite columns, some damaged by later quarrying, and then the quartzite wall in the background with the interesting pillowing that we also see.
What he's saying is that it was underground. You can see it now because they destroyed it, or it got destroyed. But why we don't ever think that they had buildings that hide underground when people were invading, bugs me.
Times. That would be above the roof of this ancient sealed unit. And here we have a scale model of Karnak. Karnak is one of the biggest ancient complexes in Egypt, and it is a combination of dynastic construction and then pre-dynastic. You can see on the left 1, 2, 3 obelisks, then 2 more, then 2 more, and I believe there are 2 more. And look at their relative positioning. It's almost like they're designed and set up in a grid-like pattern. Now they're made of granite, 1 piece of granite each, in some cases weighing up to 400 tons. So the Bronze Age dynastic Egyptians could not have constructed or carved out moved and set these into place. So they are a pre-dynastic aspect that the dynastic people found, and then they built their structures in sandstone, which is a softer material, around it.
Okay, let's blow the lid off this for a quick 2 minutes, so we can all have the same similar understanding. Egypt is the youngest of all civilizations that exist of the ancient world. That's like where every civilization damn near came together and built that place and brought out the technology. It's the bottom of the Nile. The top of the Nile is what we call the bottom of Africa, right? Which is closer to going towards, what's that, Antarctica? That's the top of the Nile, where the Nile starts. That's where life starts. That's where everything comes from. Numbers, math, everything. That's where the origins come from. When he say you see these old things, it's possible that some of these structures were there already from pre-dynastic. When they say Egypt, Egypt is a baby. So when they confuse you and say pre-dynastic Egypt is Nubia. Because before there was Egypt, the Nubians was doing it. And pre-dynastic Nubians, they keep going further back, right? So pre-dynastic Egypt is nothing because Egypt is the baby. Egypt, that's why so many people would conquer Egypt. Egypt was located in the center of Africa by the Horn, where it wasn't as hot as the center of Africa. So they put it there and more people could come there because everybody couldn't stand the heat in the middle of Africa, right? In the middle of that continent that we call Africa. But pre-dynastic Egypt is all of the dynasties that existed, Nubia, Ghana, and the place we call Ghana today, with Mansa from all these different dynastic places. And they all helped create Egypt later. Egypt is the youngest civilization that Africa has to offer compared to the rest. And that's why when he keeps saying pre-dynastic, they couldn't have did it. Well, he just won't tell you because they don't tend to want to teach that pre-dynastic Egypt is you just keep getting darker.
Now, we see lots of catastrophic damage. Again, this is the base of one of the obelisks. And you can see that the surfaces here on the east side, the weathering is extreme. The higher up you go, the less weathering there is. And it could be, according to Dr. Robert Schock, a geologist, that 12,000 years ago, there were plasma bursts that erupted from the sun and struck some of these lower surfaces and blew the surfaces off. So from my estimation, this plasma ball would have been approximately 60 feet in diameter and would have gone straight down what is called the sacred original passageway, creating destruction as it went. Also here, to the right of that camera, is a saw mark cut into the granite, and that had to have been done with a machine. The hieroglyphics were done later using simple hand tools, but that is clear indication of lost ancient high technology cutting into the granite. And then we find many core drill holes, some of them this size. Core drills with diamonds embedded in the front were only invented in the early 20th century AD or maybe late 19th century. So these again are artifacts from pre-dynastic times, and they are in great abundance in places like Karnak and lesser known places like Abu Sir, which most tourists never.
This is why when we be having intellectual conversations about truth, everybody's so confused and everybody arguing. Because a lot of people go to school and be arguing with me like with the tools. Why would they not have diamonds, drills? And they had diamonds.
Drills of that scale were probably only created in the late 20th century AD, because you would have to have an enormous drill powering that. So once again, in the lower areas of Karnak, in the oldest part, we see heat scorching of the surfaces. This is granite, and it's as if the surface has been basically burnt off. So that's another indication of very high heat in ancient times existing at Karnak. And then this intriguing object showing major damage. And it is a type of alabaster, which is not that hard, but originally this was one solid piece of stone. And there are no quarries of this kind of alabaster in Egypt, so it had to have been moved from a quarry somewhere else, possibly Turkey, and an estimated weight of that when it was original, even if it had been shaped at the quarry and then moved here, would be somewhere between 500 and 1,000 tons. Again, it was one piece of stone. It doesn't look like it now because it's been repaired. And this shows you the inner surfaces, that they're actually curved, which is quite interesting. And the hieroglyphics on the surfaces are quite crude. So the dynastic people carved the hieroglyphics into this ancient thing, which originally had no artwork on it whatsoever. And that's what we're going to see in the pre-dynastic work, is you don't see artwork whatsoever. But during the dynastic times, you see, of course, hieroglyphics and lots of art. And once again, showing the damage to the lower part of one of the obelisks. This is actually on the, I think, the western side. So the eastern sides in general were more heavily damaged than the other sides. The western side actually the least damaged. And so this tells us that the force that struck Karnak came from the east, and quite possibly at dawn, almost like the sun would rise and a fireball would strike through the complex. Also, the main axis is supposed to be perfectly east to west, but it's 23 degrees off. And that could indicate that the planet was at a different axis prior to 12,000 years ago, when the cataclysm, we believe, occurred. So again, more of this strange damage at Karnak. You can see that the material, the granite, is basically sloughing off, and that indicates once again that rapid high heat struck the surface, causing the surface to expand, and over the course of time, the surface layers began to peel off. And again, at the lower part on the left, or actually where I'm pointing, you can see another indication of a core drill hole. And now we're actually almost at the end of the main axis in Karnak. And once again, we're going to see extreme heat damage on the stone surfaces. So this is granite, and you can see that it's basically falling apart as if it has been hit by high heat in the distant past and is now gradually crumbling. The different types of stone react to heat in different ways. So here again on the left-hand side, we have another piece of granite that's crumbling. And then in the background is a giant slab of the alabaster, and its surface has basically exploded off. But on the backside, we do see more core drill holes. And again, these can't be things that were done during the dynastic period. So this is another specimen of something that was pre-dynastic, found at Karnak when the dynastic Egyptians...
Okay, also understand that in the last 100 years, that they have moved certain temples uphill. So he also ain't talking about it. But like, there's a lot of like, I'll give you an example. Ramses' tomb, they moved it. They cut it up and they moved it a mile up the mountain because the Nile River is expanding and it'd be underwater right now. So they cut some of these things up and they moved it block by block with cranes and shit. So don't let them just sit here and fool you and lie to you. But you'll see why I'm showing you this when we get inside this pyramid.
Arrived in the area. That was a tendency. They would find an ancient...
But don't completely misjudge him and throw him off either, because there are some things that we have to be honest. There's certain pharaohs or people that came along and found stuff and wrote their name on it. If we don't think that's possible, we're not being honest with ourselves. Some things are actually older than we even think they are, and even some of our ancestors wrote their name on stuff that they had nothing to do with. It's possible.
Structure that preceded them and turn it into a sacred site. Then we're at the Aswan Quarry. And the Aswan Quarry is a granite quarry. That's where most of the granite from Egypt was taken from. And here you see dynastic period attempts to break the stone. Slots were created with very hardened bronze that would take a long time to do, possibly even with iron later on. And then they would put wooden shims into the recesses and pour hot water on them, and over the course of time, that would cause cracks to happen. So you'd have a very rough surface created afterwards. But contrast that on the right, which again is the indication of how the dynastic people broke the stone, with these strange scoop marks on the left. And the scoop marks are a clear sign of ancient technology that was prior to the dynastic people. And we're going to see more examples of this as we go along here. So here, more of these scoop marks, and this is the unfinished obelisk at Aswan, which, had it been completed, would have weighed 1,200 tons. And that's what it looks like. Look at the size of the people compared to the size of the obelisk. It was never completed, which is a mystery. And the other question is, even if they had been able to cut the whole thing out, how would they raise it out of the pit that it's in, since the surface is not flat, it's very much rolling. And granite is actually quite brittle, so it would have to be perfectly balanced as it was taken out of the quarry location, otherwise it would snap easily into two pieces. And here you see the, the Western Trench, and again of the unfinished obelisk, and again these interesting scooping tool marks. Unlikely hand tools. The standard explanation is that they had hardened stone hammers that they used to pound away to remove the granite, but the pounders were only slightly harder than the granite itself. So even creating a channel like that would take hundreds of years, if it was even possible. And here, this is a smaller obelisk that was never completed. And you see these interesting deep scoop marks into it. I think those were done by some kind of machine. There's no way you'd have a stone pounder and you'd be pushing in like this trying to remove granite from the surface, because we actually experimented with that. And I filmed it, and it looks quite stupid. Then we see here at, I think this is Karnak as well, again, extreme erosion of limestone surfaces, blackening of the surfaces. Wind erosion would simply cause the white limestone to weather, and it would still be white looking, but the blackening indicates intense heat. And then also...
You know what? I'm still tired of hearing this dude a little bit, but it's 115, 20 degree weather in Africa every day. So, of course, after thousands of years, things are going to be overly hot, scorched, burnt. Used to be trees there. There was forest fires. It was trees there. It wasn't always desert. You know what I'm saying? But when I want to remind you, in a book I read, Destruction of the Black Civilization, limestone is also in the ocean floor of the Nile River, which it was soft because the water ran over and it was cutting through the floor of the ocean. Like the Nile River was created, but it's basically limestone in the bottom of the Nile. And they were saying how the water was, because the water was flowing through it in this, from this, the bottom of Africa to the top of Africa, stopping at Egypt, going back around to the bottom, going like just constantly going in a circle, that it was cutting through the limestone. So the limestone in the Nile River, they were saying was soft. Now, I put together myself, if the limestone in the water was soft, why wouldn't they use the clay-like limestone to build, right? Why wouldn't they craft it and then, you know what I'm saying, and let it harden by the sun? Because they knew that the sun would dry it out.
Also, these incredible shaft systems at Saqqara in Egypt, and these almost machining carving marks going deep into the bedrock. There are many of these shafts. Some of them are 16 feet by 16 feet in size, and they probably connect to a tunnel system farther down. Also, we have this scorching here. You can see this darkening orange and even brown and black. So again, I think that's an indication of possible solar plasma striking Saqqara. And solar plasma striking a surface like that would vaporize all organic life. So if there were any plants living there, any people, any animals, they would be instantaneously vaporized, and the area would not be habitable for probably thousands of years. That is another indication that there were those that did the early construction, maybe 12,000 years ago. Then a series of cataclysms struck, and then the area was uninhabitable until maybe 5,000 years ago. Also, we see more devastating damage done to a small pyramid at Saqqara, as if the surfaces have exploded off. Some would say this is damaged by vandals, but it looks more to me like this is intense heat and literally blew the top of this small pyramid off. And here we see more examples of probable heat scorching.
Do your history. When Alexander and them got there and a lot of the conquerors came to take Egypt, they took their cannons. They took thousands of cannons and shot at the pyramids and used the cannons to shoot off the noses of stuff. So, you know, and when they was destroying towns, they set them on fire.
Shattering of the stone. And it does appear that this little pyramid was hit at the very top by a very intense burst of heat. And here again, this incredible weathering into the surface and the blackening of the surface, the intense damage. This is actually the casing stone that's still on the lower part of it. But that weathering could not simply have been done by wind and sand. It's something much more devastating occurred here a long, long time ago. And I think that the dynastic people found this little pyramid. They didn't try to repair it, but they did use the interior as a tomb. So inside, we see this box, which could have been used as a tomb. And again, it has strange scorching on the interior. We couldn't really figure out what kind of stone it was. Interior space is about 9 feet long. It would weigh in the region of 60 to 80 tons. And it could be basalt or possibly syenite, which is a type of granite, which again could not have been shaped efficiently during dynastic times. And this shows you that originally the lid of the box would have locked into it. So not just a lid that went on top, but three-dimensionally locked into it. And that's just one of the curious little aspects that I was looking at in this case. Then also at Saqqara, we have the step pyramid of Zoser. And most Egyptologists think that this was one of the earliest attempts of constructing a pyramid, and that later on, once they had perfected their technique, they built the Great Pyramid. But I and others believe that actually the Great Pyramid existed, as did some of the others, and this was a way of the dynastic people trying to copy without having the technological capability of replicating the Great Pyramid itself. They had to build it in a step manner. And next, we're still at Saqqara, and we are underground at the Serapeum, which is a series of 2 tunnels carved into the bedrock, and what we find here, and hundreds of feet long. One curious thing is there is no soot or other kind of organic darkened material on the surface, so these tunnels were completely pitch black, and there's no way that the dynastic Egyptians made it, because they had at best torches of some kind. No one's bothered to try to clean the surfaces, so this is what these tunnels have always looked like. So the impression is that they were made using high technology, and that artificial lighting would have to have been done in order to make them. And what we find inside of these tunnels are 25 plus stone boxes weighing 100 tons apiece. So this is one of the Serapeum boxes, and the material is syenite that probably came from Aswan, 500 miles away. The lid is 30 tons, the box is 70 tons, and the sculpting or carving of the hieroglyphics on the surface is much cruder than the box itself. So these boxes were found by the dynastic people, and then they etched the hieroglyphics into the surfaces. This just shows you, again, the sense of precision. The lid would hermetically seal the box. The lid of the box was made from the same piece of stone as the box itself. So originally, it would have been 200 tons, and then when completed, 100 tons. So how was it moved from Aswan? How was it moved to the location? How was it moved into the tunnel? And then how was it moved into the recess that we presently find it in? So once again, this just gives you a sense of scale. You know, there's a standard 6-foot human next to one of these giant boxes. One was never finished, and it's in the other hallway. So this is the roughened shape halfway down the hall. It never made it to its final location, which was a niche. And then we find the lid behind it about 100 feet away. So this is like trapped in time. Why did they stop work here? We see evidence in many locations of a megalithic nature where work suddenly stops. And so I think that all of this sudden stoppage was as a result of an ancient cataclysmic event about 12,000 years ago. So there's the lid. Roughened out, never finished, and by the time the box and the lid make it into the niche, how were they planning on doing the finishing work to make it a hermetical perfect seal without having proper lighting and without having advanced technology? Then we are at Tanis, which is located in northern Egypt. What you can obviously see is that this granite lid was recycled, because you see partial hieroglyphs and then they abruptly end. And then the box itself is made of quartzite. So this is a recycling effort during dynastic times of pre-dynastic workmanship. So Tanis is basically devoid of life. If you look in the background, you see beautiful farmland of the Nile Delta, but almost nothing can grow at Tanis. And as you walk on the surface, it's like walking on the moon. It's like walking on flour. So I think this again was a place that was struck by an ancient cataclysm involving heat, quite possibly plasma ejection from the sun, and it basically decimated the site. It would have vaporized any life forms, and there are a handful of thorny plants that presently live there, and nothing else. It's like a wasteland. Also, the hieroglyphics on the left look like they were done with a machine, whereas the ones on the right look like they were done by hand. So the hieroglyphics on the left are pre-dynastic, the ones on the right are dynastic, and that gives us the strong possibility that hieroglyphics were not created by the dynastic people, but were an inheritance, and they were reinterpreted by the dynastic people. Same symbols, different symbolism. This piece of quartzite was struck by intense heat because it should be a cream color, but you can see some of the surfaces are melted. So that tells us, again, high heat at Tanis. And then the right side of this face is burnt off. Again, this is quartzite. So this is a pre-dynastic sculpture that was struck by the cataclysmic heat and was found, as most of Tanis was found, the sculptures and what was left of the obelisk were found buried underground, not buried on purpose, but a cataclysmic event that caused the soil to blow up into the air, come back down and settle, tons upon tons of it, and then cover the site over, to be discovered by the dynastic people and then occupied. And then most of these works were then unearthed in the 19th and 20th century AD. This is just a detail again of the burnt surfaces of this sculpture, with pieces literally being blown off by the intense heat. And another stone that should be creamy colored, like on the left side, but has been distorted, and also some of the material or surfaces turned into glass. This is a foot. The original sculpture, if it was one piece, would have been 100 feet high. And the quarry at Aswan is 1,000 kilometers to the south. And this was the lid of a giant granite box, again made of the granite from Aswan. This sculpture was blown apart by intense heat And if you look down where the toes should be, the toes are melted off. And this is a close-up of that. You see the globular glass-like formations. So that was melted by at least 2,000 degrees Celsius. And another sculpture that has been hit by intense heat, darkening the surface, causing melting, causing portions to blow off. Nothing at Tanis is intact. It's all destroyed. Giant sections of obelisks. There were more obelisks at Tanis than anywhere else in Egypt, probably at least 14 or 15, smashed into pieces. Again, you see eroded surfaces. This column would have been one piece originally, more than 30 feet long. And then the dynastic people, finding the remnants of a lost ancient high-tech culture, decided to rebuild some sections. That's what you see here. They took the eroded stones and were able to restack them and then do quite crude repair work in the middle of the right-hand side of that wall. And then there are underground features that we're going to explore on the Giza Plateau. Only recently open to the public with the Great Pyramid in behind. This is called the Osiris Shaft, and it's a series of shafts that go down 200 feet into the bedrock. The general public has only been allowed in here since November of 2017, and we paid the fee so that we could have private access for 2 hours. And again, there's the second pyramid. So this is the causeway going to the second pyramid. And the entrance is underneath the causeway. So as we go in, we're in the bedrock. And you look up and you see a metal grate. And as you look down, you're looking to the first level, which is 30 feet underground. And this is the ladder. Luckily, the new fangled ladder, because the old one was very rickety. So when you get to the first level, it's about 15 feet wide and 30 feet long. And then you come to the ladder that takes you down to level number 2. And level number 2 is 100 feet down into the bedrock. So now we are 130 feet, underground. And there we find 6 niches in which we find 2 boxes. This stone box is made of what's called dacite, and dacite is not found in Egypt. It's from elsewhere. Likely maybe Turkey or somewhere else, but not in Egypt. So it was moved a huge distance. And the interior is filled, a surface film of this odd black goo, organic-like material. I don't know what it was, but it looks like it literally exploded from the inside, that there was an internal explosion that blew the lid off to the side. And even more so is this one, which is the other box, and you can see the massive crack on the side. So I think this suffered from some kind of internal explosion. So the theory is that this was not originally a sarcophagus, but it was an energy device of some kind that overloaded and it had an internal explosion. So the final level is another 60 feet underground, and there you can see a pool of water. And in that, there is Yusuf Awiyan standing on a giant stone box weighing, in his estimation, 60 to 80 tons. So when we go back the next time, we're going to measure the dimensions of the box and then measure the dimensions of the shaft and see how much clearance there would have been in order to be able to lower this down 30 feet, then 100 feet, and then 60 feet. And what its function was, again, it was not the symbolic tomb of Osiris. The question is not necessarily what was it used for, but how was it made and by whom. So there is going back up to the surface. And now we're in the Valley Temple, which is located in the region of the Sphinx on the Giza Plateau. Giant slabs of granite from Aswan. And here again, giant slabs that used to be the facing of a core of limestone. But again, look at the extent of the erosion of the limestone. So how many thousands of years ago was the granite removed? And was it removed by somebody to recycle? Or was it blown off by some kind of cataclysmic event? Then we're inside the Valley Temple. And you see these giant vertical granite slabs. There used to be cross beams going across it. Look at the weathering of the surfaces. This actually looks like water weathering. And so that means that this temple may have, in ancient times, had water in it, but the question is, where would the water have come from? But we will get into that when we look at the Sphinx. So now we're approaching the Sphinx with the second pyramid in the background. Notice that I call them the first pyramid, second pyramid, and third pyramid, because I think they had nothing to do with Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. They named themselves, or they named the structures after themselves, but there is no way, shape, or form that they made them. So we have this intriguing thing in front of the Sphinx. You look in that direction, that is the bedrock, but then in between the feet of the Sphinx, you have blocks of stone. And then on the other side, the bedrock. So what that indicates is that these blocks were set into place and there's a chamber underneath the paws of the Sphinx, according to what Edgar Cayce believed. And then when you look at that rectangular pattern there, that is a rectangular platform that can be taken out at any time. So it's believed that they have found the chamber under the Sphinx. There's at least one chamber discovered actually by Robert Schoch using ground-penetrating radar. And then they did the excavation late at night, and they built this walkway to hide the fact that they have found the chamber, the so-called Hall of Records, under the front paws of the Sphinx. And it has been repaired over the course of thousands upon thousands of years. It's likely that Khufu and Khafre began repairs on the Sphinx, that it is much older, and that is proven by this vertical weathering, which only could have been done with precipitation. And the amount of precipitation it would have taken to do this only existed in Egypt at least 10,000 years ago. So that makes the construction of the Sphinx at a minimum 4,000 years older, or even 5,000 years older than the dynastic people. And that's a close-up of the vertical weathering. The horizontal would have been horizontal would have been sand and wind, vertical, rain. And finally, near the back area, the rump of the Sphinx, there is a piece of rectangular piece of wood that has a grate on it, and it happened to have fallen out the day that we visited. And we looked inside, and there is a metal ladder that goes down inside the Sphinx, making it quite possibly hollow to some degree. So there is at least a shaft inside the Sphinx, and possibly a series of shafts and tunnels. And so the mysteries of ancient Egypt continue. This is at the Ramesseum, located near Luxor. And originally it was a single statue made of one single piece of stone weighing 1,000 tons. And it is in multiple pieces. We see scorch marks on it. We see the peeling off of stone. So this likely as well was a victim of an ancient cataclysm that struck the area, wiped out the first high-tech culture, and then the area was left abandoned until the dynastic Egyptian people arrived some 6 or maybe even 7,000 years later. Okay, what I'm going to show you now are some sites in Peru and Bolivia that you've probably never heard of, starting with this one. This is in a little village called Santiago de Ojé, near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. And it's called the Serpent Temple for obvious reasons, because it has this serpent-like coiled figure carved into very hard sandstone. And it's a megalithic site that looks like it suffered some kind of catastrophic damage. Nobody knows what culture made it. It was not done by the Inca. It was not done by the Tiwanaku civilization. So it's a great mystery. And here you see the strange blackening of the surface. It is possible that at one time it was lying down, and this is simply the result of aging, or it's also possible that it was struck by intense high heat in the very distant past. And here I am behind the serpent figure, and the curious thing is that it is looking towards the ancient location called Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, also located near Lake Titicaca, but about 40 miles away. So as you can see, the whole site is in a state of chaos. The local people, one would think, maybe smashed all these giant stones up in order to make building material, but almost all of it is still there. So I think an ancient cataclysmic event, possibly an earthquake, struck the site, and the surfaces are very fine and very hard, and so I think this was constructed using ancient high technology of some kind. So this just gives you another view of the area, the fact that you have blackening of some of the surfaces of the stones. Some are broken up, others are buried underground, and it's actually a giant rectangle. It's quite large in scale, but almost nobody visits this location, maybe 20 people per year. And if you want to look it up on a map, it's called Santiago de Ojai. Then next, with Lake Titicaca in the background, we have this interesting megalithic work, which they call the Orca del Inca, or the hanging place of the Inca. But in fact, it's a pre-Inca structure made as a giant solar calendar. It has the solstices and the equinoxes shown as holes in the walls in the surrounding area. And unfortunately, some of the cross pieces have been taken away or have fallen down. But this is another artifact that very few people know about. Luckily, we were there quite close to, I think, the winter solstice. So as you can see, the sun is above. And the way it was designed was so that the sun would set right in between these two giant vertical stones. So an ancient solar calendar, again, made by a culture unknown. It was not made by the Inca, but in general what happens is anything in this area is labeled as being Inca as a convenience more than anything else, not as a proof of who did the work. And simply to show you a sense of scale, there I am in between the two giant horizontals. We don't see any actual tool marks, so it could be that this is so ancient that all the tool marks have worn off. Next, we're at another location near Lake Titicaca called Kenuani. And again, nobody knows who made this. The material is volcanic tuff, so it's a compressed volcanic ash. It's not extremely hard, but nobody knows what it was used for. You can see that there are curved staircases going up, many of them. And then from a distance, this is where you see the different staircases going from basically the flat area up in curves, interconnecting, interesting circular shapes. It does look to some degree like a stadium, but a stadium for who and a stadium by who. There are also indications that it continues into and under the lake, possibly only 10 or 20 feet deep, but it's one of those places. It took me, from seeing the first photographs, about 5 years to find it, and even the local sergeant of the police, whose office was half a mile away, didn't know where it was, but we did track it down. So again, this with the bus there, this shows you a sense of scale and people in the background. It does look like a ceremonial structure of some kind, but who made it, when, and why is at this point unknown. I've only been once, but it's obviously a location to visit over and over again in order to try to figure out the mystery of Kanawani. So here, for a sense of scale, you have this curved area that's more or less in the middle, and with the people standing there, that gives you a sense of the scale. We did find tool marks there, somewhat similar to what we find or found in places like Baalbek in Lebanon. It's like a series of chisels together, cutting away at the surface like this. Again, it's not a hard material, but it's one of those great mysteries that you learn about and then you have to, at some point, track down. So here, again, with a sense of scale, these very interesting steps, very human-sized, not stairs, but could have been some kind of ceremonial seating, but there was no large area in the front to do any kind of performance. So it basically faces the lake and is one of the curiosities, one of many that we've recently been tracking down in the highlands of Peru and Bolivia. So here again, nice flat surfaces, vertical and horizontal. The intersection point is curved slightly, so they're not sharp angles coming together like that. And this is obviously a natural outcrop. And interestingly enough, the stone from that makes up Pumapunku, which is another great mystery in Bolivia, comes from a mountain in the background here. So we are actually approximately 50 miles or 70-something kilometers away from Pumapunku and Tiwanaku. So here I am simply, again, the sense of scale. You see the rough tool marks here on the surfaces. Age unknown, culture that made it unknown, function unknown. And now we're at another location near Lake Titicaca called Amaru Muru or Aramu Muru. And you see the man with the straw hat more or less in the center. Look beyond him and you'll see what is a portal. So you see, in terms of human scale, it's believed to be an energetic portal. This is a red sandstone, so it's very high in quartz crystal content, very high in iron content. Both of those are energetic materials. And then you see a slot on the left-hand side and a slot on the right-hand side. We had a number of dowsers with us there, and one of them was able to measure the energy using dowsing rods. And he believes that the central portal is of a more masculine energy and that the ones on the side are of a more feminine energy. But again, it's not something that the Inca made, not something that the Tiwanaku culture made. So it's another one of the mysteries at Lake Titicaca that is, as of yet, unexplained. And this simply gives you another view of what it looks like. It's actually similar to what we see, interestingly, in Petra in Jordan for some reason. I'm not saying there's a connection between the two. Too many people draw these comparisons and say, well, it looks like that, so it must have been the same culture. We have absolutely no idea. And there again,
yeah, they do.
with another sense of scale. It's one of a kind. There's nothing else like it in the area of Lake Titicaca. So who made it? When? Why? Still unknown. But it's called Amaru Muru or Aramu Muru. And then we're at Silustani, and this is also quite close to Lake Titicaca. This is a smaller lake. It's about the same altitude as Lake Titicaca, and this curious-looking island in the middle with a flat surface. It's most likely a natural geological feature. Some people, of course, speculated it's a place where flying saucers would land and take off. Personally, I haven't experienced that there, but one never knows. It's a very mysterious landscape. And so at Silistani, we find all of these interesting looking towers, and the towers are called chulpa. So here on the right side, you see one of the major chulpas, and it's narrower at the bottom, than at the top, and curves at the top, and the backhand or the back side of it is actually shows signs of catastrophic damage. So once again, archaeologists believe that the Inca constructed it, but it's highly unlikely because it's of a megalithic nature. The stones that are left interlock perfectly, and so this had to have been created using high technology of some kind. So what's curious is when we look at the backside of it. So you see you have an outer area or outer layer, which is made of basalt stone with these pockets in it. And those pockets actually could have been used for resonance. You would think that there would be like a male aspect that would fit into the female hollow, but that's not the case. A female part would meet the female part. And so I think we're looking at a resonance structure of some kind. And then you have the core part, which is made of a different kind of stone called andesite, which is much more dense than basalt. And if you take two of those stones and strike them together, they create a ringing sound. So it seems to have been a vibratory structure made of two kinds of stone. The outer area seems maybe to have been an insulator, and there is access into it, and the inside of it is actually domed like a beehive. So it was used, or they were used as tombs during Inca and pre-Inca times, but the Inca did not construct it. And so again, it's one of those mysterious things that we find in the Lake Titicaca area. Next, we are at the Island of the Moon, which is in Lake Titicaca.
But remember, by now we should know that we've watched the videos of seeing how the ancient people of like just Mali and Mansa Musa and his family left and came to America way, way before all of this was being established, what we call the Mayans and the Incas and stuff like this.
Titicaca. And this is an Inca period construction. Island of the Moon being a place of spiritual energy for women, for the priestesses of the Inca time period. And it's a relatively rough construction, but this is typical of Inca work. Contrary to popular belief, the Inca did not make the megalithic structures in Cusco or surrounding area, but they were able to make this. This is adobe mixed with local stone. And so this is reconstructed, and you can see that it's relatively crude, and this is typical of the Inca time period. The Inca were a Bronze Age people, so they did not have the technology to cut hard stone. And so this is the Temple of the Moon on the Island of the Moon at Lake Titicaca. And just in a little more detail, you can see this is only partially reconstructed. The surfaces during Inca times would have been perfectly smooth and possibly even colored white, because white is symbolic of the moon. And so since it's not been reconstructed, we can see that the interior is relatively crude in terms of its construction. And again, these are more walls that were built during Inca times. Quite simple terracing. The Island of the Moon was capable of being self-sufficient, and so that's why you have vast amounts of terraces. Population was probably only a few hundred people. And what's curious, though, is what we're going to look at next, and that's this wall. Now you can see that these stones appear to have been shaped maybe by some kind of saw or even machine. Once again, it's basalt. So you would need much harder material like diamond-encrusted blades to properly cut the basalt. So it appears that there are constructions on the Island of the Moon that predate the Inca. They do look like, or the wall looks like it did suffer from some kind of catastrophic damage and then was reconstructed during Inca times. But it's one of the small curiosities that we find on the island. Then we are up in actually close to the coast of Peru, and this is near what's called Paracas, which is on the coast. And this little town is located in between the coast and Cusco in the highlands. It's called Huaytará. And so look at the adobe wall in the background, and then look at the stone wall on the right-hand side. This is a very hard stone on the right. The stones fit perfectly together. And you can see there's quite possible evidence of heat damage to the walls. And also they fit still perfectly together. No mortar, no clay, no concrete, no filler. And the wall is at least 3 feet thick. And it's as perfect on the outside as it is on the inside and all the way through. So this was or is located in Inca country, but could not have been made by the Inca. The Inca found it and simply adopted it. So once again, we're looking at more of the detail. Perfect fitting stones. You can't fit a human hair in the joints. The darkening of the surfaces and the peeling off the surfaces could very well indicate high heat. Ancient catastrophe may have struck this area at one point. We also see that in the city of Cusco on the megalithic walls. And then an obvious comparison. Here you see the original structure from the bottom halfway up, and then either Inca or colonial Spanish work out of adobe above it. So 2 levels of construction, superior on the bottom, inferior on the top, and this ancient doorway was at some point in time filled in. And again, another one of these trapezoidal.
When you say how do they know who made it, what do you mean? Like they don't, so I'll wait for you to type it in, but one of the things when I made a comment earlier, I was saying in the aspect, he was saying that he's seen certain buildings, like he's seen certain types of buildings that's not related to the Maya or the Inca, and he's seen it in Jordan, which is like in Africa, or he's seen it in different parts of Africa. But he was like, I'm not going to draw a correlation saying they're the same people because we got no proof. But if the building style and the way that they build comes from is that culture's distinctive building, and you find it over different places, then that's how you know it's the same people. We know that the so-called Africans, who we call Africans, you know what I'm saying, the Mansa Musa, his people, you know what I'm saying, and his name was Abu Bakari. Abu Bakari, his grandfather and all them in other civilizations were seafaring civilizations. So they would definitely leave one place and take all their best architects and engineers, and they would go to another place and start a new society. That's why, how could people live in this area but not have this technology? Because they didn't come from the place.
Doorways typical of the Inca culture, but also much more typical of the older megalithic builders. The Inca simply adopted the trapezoid shape because they found it aesthetically pleasing. And again, the super tight fitting of the stones themselves, the quarry is in the nature of 20 to 30 miles away. Not huge stones. 1 person or 2 people could have carried each one. So it's not on a grand scale, but it's the accuracy of the workmanship that's important to look at. And then again, you have this very interesting looking damage here and there and in other locations. It's a very dense, tight-fitting stone. It doesn't normally weather that way, so that's indicative of some kind of external damage hitting the site. Here, especially on this one corner, you can see on the left side, it's still quite immaculate, some dark staining of some kind, and then the farther that we get to the right-hand side of it, the more the damage, the more it looks like the surfaces have literally been blown off. And so I think that this is another example of a super ancient structure that could be as much as 12,000 years old, that was hit by an ancient catastrophe, possibly blasts of plasma heat from the sun. And then here I am just in terms of the sense of scale. Once again, we see these trapezoid shapes and this profound damage to the surfaces. And once again, the majority of the damage is on one corner. As you see on the left-hand side, you have the stone that has blown off or peeled off, and then on the right-hand side, it's still quite intact. So something very devastating happened on one corner of the building, much more than the rest. And you see the size of the lintels. The lintels are quite massive and interlock quite perfectly. And as we progress down the side, once again, the ancient structure on the bottom, going halfway up, the either Inca or Spanish colonial work above, and then the arched entranceway is colonial Spanish. So this is what we often find in these locations. You'll find different ages, the most ancient aspect always incorporated into the later construction, because why would you take something down when it has been so well made? And inside the building, these interesting trapezoid shapes, but not 90-degree angles. It's just two angles coming together. It's the only building of its kind that I found so far that has this, so it's quite curious. And when we look on the opposite wall,
Jennifer, good morning.
after there are some of these normal trapezoid shapes too, but on the opposite side of the wall are windows, trapezoidal windows. So did it have something to do with sunlight coming in? Did it have to do with sound or vibration? It's a very curious building that very few people visit. And if you want to see it, again, the location is a small town in the highlands of Peru called Huaytora. So you can see the ancient recesses here, the trapezoid shapes, being utilized in the modern church. That was typical that ancient structures, whether they be Inca or even high-tech pre-Inca, would be used as churches. Especially in the city of Cusco, all of the colonial churches are built on top of or made of much more ancient Inca temples, which in turn
is what the colonials or the Europeans or the Spaniards did when they went places rather than South America. This was a holy temple for whoever built it, and they made it into a Christian temple, just like how they did the Vatican, just like how they did other stuff in Europe, just like how they did things in Egypt and Nubia, where they said, well, this is where John the Baptist was baptized, but that place was ancient, you know what I mean, respectfully. But that's what they did, is what he's saying.
Are built on top of much more ancient megalithic sites. So here you see the opposite side with the trapezoidal shaped windows. When the light comes through, it goes towards those angled depressions. And again, let's compare here. These are the trapezoid shapes letting the light in. And on the opposite wall, we have these angled depressions. So not something I've been able to fully figure out. The other complication is the fact that there have been 2 fires inside the building over the course of time. So this internal darkening is the result of an internal fire, but the external damage is unlikely to have been from these 2 fires. So that probably happened far longer ago in time. And now we're still in the highlands of Peru, near the city of Ayacucho, which was a major Inca settlement. And these are these steps you have to get to in order to get to some of them. They're currently building a new road, so it took us several hours to get there. But some of the most interesting places are not located near where tourists go, so it requires quite a bit of effort to be able to go and visit them. But in this case, it worked out quite well for us. So we're in this little village driving through, trying to find an ancient church, a Catholic church, built on top of an Inca settlement, built on top of an older megalithic work. And here we are. So of course you see the church, relatively crudely made. This interesting shape on the left-hand side, which is from the older, much older megalithic time period, and then some polygonal walls here. And this is an Inca reconstruction. You can tell because you see these beautifully shaped blocks that had to have been cut using some kind of relatively high technology because the stone is basalt. And so the Inca found an ancient megalithic site located here, and they reconstructed it as best they could.
They just threw stones
Part of
anywhere.
this niche may be original, But it's obvious that that is a reconstructed effort. On the left-hand side, a mix of ancient megalithic blocks and then local material found in the area. And here too, this is another Inca reconstruction. Notice these almost perfectly shaped cubes, which had to have been cut and shaped at a quarry using a relative level of high technology and then much rougher material. So this is typical of an Inca reconstruction effort at a much more ancient location. Then we have the staircase going up to the church. You see that the stones interlock quite perfectly, no gaps in between. So this is more likely, or this is, part of the megalithic aspects of the construction here. Because of the great workmanship of the megalithic builders, this has withstood earthquake after earthquake. And so it was in place when the Inca found the location, and so they simply incorporated it into the construction of their temple. And then when the colonial Spanish arrived, they converted the Inca temple into their colonial church. And here, this again is likely, actually this could very well be the so-called megalithic time period. Not that the stones are huge, but look at the perfect way that they interlock. There has been some damage in the upper areas, but this is the polygonal work, which is typical of the Cusco, Peru area, done by the mysterious ancient megalithic builders. This wall section was found by the Inca maybe 800 years ago, and so they built their temple incorporating what was already there. And again, when we take a compass and go up to the wall, we see that it's several degrees off where it's supposed to be. It should be perfectly north, south, east, and west, but it's off by, it looks in this case, 30 degrees, and so that's quite curious. Originally, it would have been built perfectly north, south, east, and west, and so it could be that the axis or tilt of the Earth has changed over the course of time, and that may well have happened during the cataclysmic events of about 12,000.
So it still supports the reason of what scientists believe that the polar ice caps were in different places. Like, you know how right now they say they're at the bottom and the top? Well, they was from east to west before, including, that's why Europe, or where they would say the area was like the extension of each ice cap being on each side like arms instead of head and feet.
1,000 years ago. And here we find interesting looking damage. Again, look at the beautiful way that it was originally constructed, and then the surface of the stone is falling off. So it's quite likely that catastrophic damage in terms of heat happened in this location. And again, we've seen this in many other locations in different megalithic areas of the world, Peru and Egypt and elsewhere. And again, it could indicate very much that according to the theory of Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist, that plasma from the sun struck specific points of the Earth approximately 12,000 years ago, which is at the same time as the very rapid ending of the last ice age. And here on the left-hand side, you have the Inca reconstruction, and on the right-hand side, you see the original megalithic. So the left-hand side of the wall fell down as a result of some kind of major earthquake or other cataclysmic event. Then the Inca found the site several thousand years later, and then they rebuilt it. They wanted to integrate the work that they found on the right here with their level of craftsmanship. But the level of craftsmanship on the right is profoundly greater than that on the left. And here we see vitrification, which is where the surface of the basalt has literally melted. So there you see boiling marks of the stone. That would require at least 1,000 degrees Celsius, and so that would not have been from a standard open fire. That would be from some kind of possible plasma event, striking and boiling the surface and blowing some of the stone off. And this just in close-up, again, you see the surface of the stone has not only melted, but it's turned into a type of glass. And moving along, I think this again is megalithic in nature, not huge in terms of scale, but incredible in terms of the interlocking nature of the stone. The way it was done would be very much earthquake proofing, and then compare that with the stone on the left-hand side on the top. You can see it's much rougher. So I think that is an indication of Inca repair work done to a much older megalithic structure. And here we have Irene sitting inside this interesting looking piece of stone. Where it originally was located, we don't know. But you see the scale of it. It's at least 5 tons. It's made of basalt, and the surfaces look like they were shaped using some kind of advanced technology. And above her is where that area of melting or vitrification is located. And so this is the only location I've been able to find so far in the highlands of Peru that clearly show ancient vitrification of hard stone surfaces. Then right next door we have another megalithic structure. You can see they've had to reinforce it because it's in danger of collapsing. Something struck this with an intense force and basically blew the stones of the left and the side off. Thankfully, the rest of it is still intact. But again, we're going to see the combination of Inca work and then older megalithic work. So this is an Inca repair. You see this perfect joinery. So these two stones are from the first time period of construction. Those stones put into there are Inca repair work, and then more Inca repair on the left-hand side. So that's older here, later there. Pre-Inca, Inca. And another of the megalithic structures turned into a temple by the Inca, somewhat intact on the bottom. Repair work farther up, like that. So the Inca found this damaged by some kind of ancient event, and then they adopted it, and then they repaired it, and they used it as a temple of some kind, and then they abandoned it when the Spanish entered the area somewhere in the region of 450 years ago. And this is one of the original gates into it, again a trapezoid shape. Not something that was invented by the Inca, but something that was adopted because of its aesthetic beauty, and also because a trapezoid shape like that is much stronger than a simple rectangular doorway. So the two sides are pushing down and pushing into each other. That makes it very rigid, very strong. And then, so the portal or the doorway is intact, and then Inca repair work on the upper right-hand side. And again, this is indicative, most likely, of the first time period of construction. Very tight-looking joinery in the basalt stone. Some movement here from an ancient earthquake, most likely. And then the later work of the Inca in reconstruction. They tried to fit the wall together back as well as they could. Some people would say, well, maybe this is Spanish, but the Spanish actually didn't bother doing reconstruction like this. They brought with them the concept of concrete, so they would concrete everything back together. It was also a way to simply rebuild something, because if you use mortar or clay, it's a lot faster technique than trying to interlock the stones once again. So to me, this looks like the Inca very much respected what it is they found, and they tried to repair it as best as they could. And once again, an original doorway, quite tight fitting, showing major damage, and then some Inca repair on the upper right-hand side and down to here. Here's the original, tight fitting together. And once again, the same thing. You see that the stone tightly fits together all the way from the front to the back. There are no gaps inside. It's all very precision workmanship, and that is indicative of having levels of lost ancient high technology capable of very efficiently cutting a very hard stone like basalt. So we're indicating at least diamond level of technology, or possibly even more advanced than that. And also in the area we find Inca work. This is simply carved into a large stone. This was a way of actually predicting the future or prophecy by pouring corn beer down the channel. You would watch the pattern of how it moved in these snake-like fashion, and then you would be able to, what you would do is ask a question, then pour the corn beer, and then the probability or percentage that went down the left or right side would indicate a yes or no answer to a certain percentage. So 70% yes, 30% no, on and on. But you see the roughness of the work, so that's indicative of Inca level technology. And just a close-up of another one, probable divining device of some kind from the Inca time period. And here we are at another location in the highlands of Peru. This is a slab of basalt stone that weighs approximately 15 tons. It was found buried underground, and it's located at a site called Wari, which was a culture that lived just prior to the Inca culture. They had no level of technology whatsoever. Their building style was quite a bit cruder than the Inca, as indicated by the wall right in behind here and what you can see above. So in a comparison between this workmanship and whatever shaped that, you're talking night and day. So this was an earlier construction, literally found buried underground by archaeologists about 10 years ago. And this is another one of these giant slabs found buried underground. It weighs somewhere in the region of 5 to 10 tons. And again, compare the workmanship of that with the walls on the right-hand side. So whether the Wadi culture even knew that that stone existed, we don't know to this day. But clearly it's finer in workmanship and older than the other work. And this is standard Wadi culture construction. Again, it's like dry stacking of stone, maybe utilizing a little bit of mortar. The Inca were superior, and the Inca came later. The Wadi culture was relatively smaller in the area of Andahuaylas in the highlands of Peru. And this is one of their ceremonial structures. You see, quite crudely made, relatively. And dry stacking of stone walls. But then we find these stone features as literally as if a drill had gone through the basalt. And these stones interlocked with one another, like a male and female coupling. It could have been some kind of way of moving water, but what level of technology would have to be involved in order to cut into the stone like that? So this is another example of ancient stonework done using some level of high technology, destroyed and then discovered by the Wadi culture somewhere around 1,000 years ago. And then here we go. Here we see more of the drill holes, and then these half drill holes, all part of an ancient drainage device made of very hard stone, discovered broken to pieces, and only recently discovered by archaeologists in the area. Also in the background, look at the stones on the left wall. You see some of them had to have been precision cut in ancient times and then rebuilt by the Wadi. And then contrast that with the wall that you see on the right-hand side. Very crude on the right side, ancient high-tech stone cutting incorporated into a Wari structure. And just again, I find these fascinating. One of the only locations in the highlands of Peru where you find this kind of ancient plumbing of some kind at work. And also in the same location, we have these giant slabs of basalt. Look at the crudeness of the wall below, and then giant slabs of stone that had to have been cut using saws of some kind. So again, you have night and day in terms of workmanship. And this is what that structure looks like now. It's likely that it was rebuilt by the Wadi from these slabs found in the area. They may have converted it into tombs or possibly even into cisterns for holding water of some kind. And contrast those stones with the walls that you see around it. Very crude, very sophisticated. And also, unfortunately you can't see, but this actually may be an original structure because it's perfectly level on the top, 0 degrees. So that would indicate that it is in its original location rather than being reconstructed. And then curious holes cut into the stone. Again, this is a very different kind of construction. I don't know where the quarry for this work is. Likely not in the adjacent area. But very hard basalt. And then when we're in the interior, you can see the stone interlocks, so that indicates that this is in its original location with some kind of damaging happening at some point in time and then being reconstructed. And this gives you a sense of scale with me climbing in, finding it very difficult to climb back out again. But there we have me inside of it. So you can see that part of the structure is original and part of it was reconstructed. And again, these may not be drill holes, but interesting to have holes. That's why I think it was actually a cistern of some kind for holding water rather than being a tomb. And quite precision joinery that you can see right here. And that's just me on top of it. And as we progress out of this complex, you see once again the difference in stone workmanship. This giant slab that's more or less in the middle as compared to the very rough work of the walls around it, like that. So this as well could be a cistern, but made in the Wadi time period. And so the giant slabs would have been used to make the cistern itself, and then that would have been used as the lid to hold the water inside. So recycling of ancient work. And here again another example. These are probably cisterns that were rebuilt by the Wari culture, and the walls surrounding it, the Wadi workmanship itself. So constantly over and over again, we're seeing two different time periods. We're seeing conventional work, such as the Wadi we see here, or the Inca, and then the recycling and inheriting of much more complicated stonework from the past. And there is no possibility that all of this could have been done by the Wadi culture, and that's why we have to change. It's pointless actually changing the history books because nobody's ever going to do that. But simply by watching this presentation, you are seeing that lost ancient high technology did exist in locations not all over the world, but predominantly in Peru, Bolivia, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, probably Greece, Turkey, maybe also in Southeast Asia. And this is where the